Good day, everyone. My name is Abraham, and on behalf of Group H, I welcome you all to our presentation. Let me begin with something familiar. There's a common assumption in Ghana here, and therefore the whole continent of Africa in general, that the more educated a person is, the better they are at making sound and well-reasoned decisions. Yet, everyday life challenges this assumption in many striking ways. Consider the widespread belief among Ghanaian youths, including the educated ones, that the use of medicated creams and drugs can enlarge physical parts of the body. Despite zero scientific evidence, many of these educated people believe in these drugs and also spend their money on them without questioning them. This brings us to the heart of today's discussion, which is critical thinking. As Richard Paul and Linda Elder describe it, it's supposed to be what education brings, but sadly enough, this is not always the case. Our group argues that this failure comes down to a triple barrier, which is the cognitive bias. When you talk about cognitive bias, it basically means the human mind, which naturally finds shortcuts to things, and also the rote learning culture, which we Ghanaians, we call it the chill and pro, and also social conformity. My dear colleagues, we will explain these three barriers to the understanding of you all. Thank you.
However, despite years of education, people still find it difficult to think critically. My question is, why? Abrantepa Blessing Akwesidela argues that critical thinking is difficult because of how the mind works naturally. I stand to be corrected that Daniel Cunningham himself explained how the mind works in thinking in two different folds. The fast thinking, which is automatic and requires little effort, while slow thinking, and it deals with analyzing each step as it flows. Critical thinking depends on slow thinking, but people rather prefer to think fast. Rather, it saves time. This often brings to cognitive biases.
Critical thinking allows individuals to make better decisions in their personal lives, workplaces, and communities. A champion Saf Emmanuel, will also say that the influence of the education in the society, as Master Limpman also believed that education should help students think for themselves rather than accepting any information from others. According to John Dewey, education should not only teach about facts, but also help people to think for themselves and reflect in their problems.
Education doesn't guarantee critical thinking. Even the most qualified people can be influenced by bias and overconfidence. This is known as the paradox of the educated. As Carol Dweck's research shows, a fixed mindset leads people to avoid negative judgment, which hinders their ability to grow and think clearly.
If critical thinking is difficult, how can society encourage it? Students should focus less on memorization and more on discussion, problem solving, and inquiries. Students should be encouraged to ask questions and elevate evidence rather than repeating information. People should learn about common cognitive biases. Understanding biases such as confirmation bias can help an individual recognize mistakes in their own thinking. This will not make an individual a perfect thinker, but rather make the individual independent in decision making. Yes.
Following the ideas of John Dewey, education should promote inquiry, reflection, and problem solving rather than rote memorization. Similarly, Matthew Lickman believed that discussion and questioning help students develop critical thinking skills. Strengthening media literacy also enables people to identify misinformation and evaluate information more effectively. Together, these approaches encourage independent and responsible thinking.
Critical thinking is the ability to analyze and evaluate our thinking in order to make better decisions.
According to Richard Paul and Linda Elder, it is an important skill for personal and societal development because it helps people to solve problems and avoid misunderstanding.
However, many people, including educated individuals, find critical thinking difficult because it often favors their own beliefs, a tendency known as egocentric thinking.
People are also influenced by sociocentric thinking, where they accept the views of their social group without questioning them.
Therefore, critical thinking requires intellectual humility, open-mindedness, and a continuous self-reflection in order to become these barriers.
Critical thinking is an evidence-based review on an information or a concern to
create a logical and a reasonable conclusion. It includes questioning assumptions, identifying biases, and weighing evidences, rather than accepting information at face value, to help awaken intellect and make better choices. As Daniel Levitin rightly said, critical thinking is an active and an ongoing process. It requires that we think like scientists, updating our knowledge as new information comes in.
In this process, I hereby say that critical thinking has a backbone, which is the mind. I stand on my case and say that the mind is where all thinking begins from, before brought to reality. According to Carol Dweck, people often find critical thinking difficult because they have a fixed mindset, which makes them fear mistakes and resist new ideas. Critical thinking is easier with a growth mindset, where people are open to learning, feedback, and changing their views. This implies that thinking critically depends mainly on the state of mind.
To conclude, critical thinking is very essential for development. However, it is very difficult because the human mind naturally depends on mental shortcuts, emotions, and social influences. As scholars from Daniel Kahneman to Carol Dweck to Paul and Elder reminds us that yes, education can fill the mind with knowledge, but it takes personal effort, curiosity, and then intellectual humility in order for one to become a genuine critical thinker. Right now, the question is no longer whether critical thinking matters. The question is, are you willing to do the work? On behalf of Group H, thank you all.